Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the BPCA webinar, second part to bed bugs. So practical implementation, one of my favourite words. I think that's the most useful part of these webinars is when we get onto that practical implementation side of things. So welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We're looking at an hour, so we're going to try and keep it within the hour. I've got a prediction that today is going to be quite a lot of questions, possibly, maybe scenario-based things. And I want to make a promise to you that I'll do my best to answer those questions. But as we know with bed bugs, because there's so many variables in each situation, there's a possibility I might struggle. But we'll see where we go. And I think everybody listening today, you know, if a question comes up and, you know, I'm not quite sure of how to answer it, or I haven't got any examples of things, but you have, please put them on there. It's good to have that two-way or three-way conversation, so that would be great. Just a reminder, it's one CPD point for today, and as I promised on the last webinar we done, afterwards I'm going to get together some questions for a CPD quiz, which we will pop out on the feedback form. All you need to do is fill out that quiz in relation to today's webinar, and you'll be able to get an extra point. So bonus for everybody. Hopefully that will help you out a bit with your points for this year. Just as a few reminders, anybody who's new to the webinars, you can ask questions, you can type them in the top screen. There should be a bar that you can see, you can do that. You can be anonymous or you can put your name, completely up to you. But just remember, I can't see you and I can't hear you. So any waving or anything, I'm not gonna know that's happening. If you do answer a question, just pop it on there once as well, because even if I struggle to get to it straight away, I'll try my best to get to it by the end of the webinar. But if any that I don't manage to get to because of the time limit, I'll shout you out, and then maybe we can have some email communication and get that answered. Just for in terms of feedback as well at the end, we really want to get that feedback from you so that you know, we can build on these things and make them what you want them to be. Whether it's sort of technical or the length of them, or maybe the content as well. So really great if you can feedback to us on that. So yes, bed bugs and practical implementations, it is a very big topic. You know, it's not something we can fully cover in 1 hour, but my target for today is to cover the really important bits. We're going to do a bit on resistance, some, you know, products, not trade names, but certainly chemicals and non-chemical, and just really talking around some things. I might even give you some examples of jobs that I've dealt with before, just to give some context, and it'd be great if you guys have got anything you want to share as well. If we've got time for it, we'll do that. We've got 2 rounds of questions today, but again, you'll see where we go with that. So without further ado, let's get started. I'll get the presentation up. Okay, so as it says there, part 2, I think most of you hopefully joined us on the last webinar, which it leads nicely on from. We've got pre and post treatment requirements, so a really good chat around that and what I recommend you should do to make your job easier. Inspection and survey, of course, and then some questions, because it's a good part there to rate for questions, because you may have some regarding those first 2 subjects, and then some treatment. So generally chemical, non-chemical application, and ensuring profitable control. Now, obviously there's a 2-way part to that profitable control, but again, we'll get to that. And some more questions, hopefully, if we've got some time. Okay, so just as a quick recap in part 1, I'm not going into the biology, obviously, but still a really important part to bed bugs. And when we're looking at them and trying to figure out what we're going to do, we need to know about the biology. So I recommend, if you didn't see the last one, you can go onto our website and download that. Again, it's 59 minutes 33, as you can see, so I was just in time. But yeah, if you can download that. Okay, so today we're going to start off from where we left off. Okay, so I talked to a lot of members about bed bugs, and actually I was speaking to someone not 20-30 minutes ago about a tricky bed bug scenario. So it's a real popular call that comes into us, because they are really tricky. Now, we also get problems coming through to us where possibly treatments have failed, or a member is struggling, or maybe a customer is unhappy because of a failed bedbug treatment. And I always find that the root cause can sometimes, not all the time, but can sometimes be right at the beginning, right when that call first comes in, and asking the proper questions, speaking to your customer, and managing their expectations. Because if you don't manage their expectations, things can turn out, pretty bad for you in the end, because they're not happy. They maybe want their money back, or they want you to do more visits. You may need to do more visits, and that you maybe haven't actually accounted for. So really important that you, once that call comes in, you get as good a picture as possible. You ask them, where is the problem? What rooms is it in? How far through the building has it gone? What's the property situation? Is it a terraced? Is it a detached, or is it a semi-detached? When did this problem first start? Some may say, well, I literally noticed it last night and I got straight in touch. Others, they might say, well, actually, I've had it for a year or two, but I just didn't really realize what they were. Really builds that picture for you, of which is really important for you to decide what you need to do and what you can do. And that all comes into your survey and your quotation. Really, really important for you, but also important for your customer, because you need to make them aware of your strategy and manage their expectations in terms of how long it's going to take you and what the cost could be. I haven't got the answer to what that is. I'm sure a lot of you haven't got the answer to what, a bed bug treatment costs, really. But you've got to get as good a picture as possible so that you can manage your own expectations as well as your customer. The biggest complaint that we get is that unhappy customer from failed treatments, because that expectation wasn't managed initially, because it can be due to many things. So really important we do that. As soon as that call comes in, get as many questions answered as possible. Okay, and then obviously you do your site survey. So as well, when they call in, pre-treatment requirements then, so before you arrive, there's many things. And I know, again, this comes down to that first contact and, trying to really explain to a customer how important it is that they carry out any pre-treatment recommendations that you have. Because if they don't understand, they may not do it. They might, if you mention it within conversation or say, oh, just make sure you do X, Y, Z, but they don't really understand why they're doing it, it's a really good chance they won't do it. It goes with most things in life, to be honest. If someone doesn't understand why they're doing something, they maybe won't do it as well or do it at all. So, really make sure you get that home to them. Things like clothes, you might recommend to them any clothes that are not hanging within a wardrobe, that might be lying around or folded on a bed or a side. Get them in a see-through plastic bag, possibly. Keep them stored in there. You can possibly inspect those bags when you get there to see if you can see any evidence. But also it takes them away from that environment and just segregates them. And then you can advise things like, laundering it. So depending on the clothes, you've got to remember that not all clothes can be laundered or put in the washing machine at 60 degrees. It's not suitable. So, there's a few questions there with regards to the type of clothing they have. Some are only suitable for dry cleaning. Now, dry cleaning is a bit of a tricky one. Dry cleaning is mostly done with chemicals rather than heat. And I don't think that's going to be something that would necessarily deal with bed bugs if they are on it. But firstly, before that, I don't think the dry cleaning establishment would overly appreciate, bed bug ridden clothes coming into their business and being used. So it might be a bit tricky with those, but it's a case by case that you need to look at it. So looking at clothes and getting that up. And then clutter. Clothes will form some of that clutter. You've got toys and bags and things sitting around. As we know, treatments are a lot harder. A lot of treatment fails can come from this. And again, relating to clutter, I've had instances where I've been speaking to pest controllers who have said, well, yes, I've carried out the treatment, but it hasn't worked. And it's because they didn't carry out the pre-treatment recommendations, like clearing up clutter, etc. And really, I'm kind of think, well, you should have maybe not carried on with that work and said, look, I can't carry this work out until this clutter is removed, because in your mind, you know that there's a good chance the treatment's going to fail. So why would you carry it out? It's managing those expectations and making sure these things you ask them to do pre-treatment are carried out. How you manage that in terms of, your visits. I know it costs you money to make visits to find that these pre-treatment recommendations haven't been done, and it's frustrating, but you need to make sure you account for that in terms of your survey and your costs and things, because it's really important you don't go ahead with it if they don't carry out these recommendations. Access as well, a real big issue sometimes. They might say, oh well, you can do all of the rooms apart from that room, someone's sleeping in there at the minute, or I don't know, well, no, that room's a bit messy, we'll leave that room, or we've got some neighbours next door, we've got a problem as well, but they're not in today, and so on. You really need to get a good idea of or let your customer know that you need to get access to everywhere that they have access to themselves. And again, if it's a multi-occupied building, you've got to think about long-term picture, and maybe there could be problems throughout a block or throughout a terraced line of houses. It could happen. So you've just got to have this in the back of your mind. It could happen. What things could happen, and that all forms that managing expectations and building that picture for you and your customer. It really does cause you less problems in the long run. So yeah, and it's all about that, not transferring any bed bugs from room to room. We have it in speaking to some people earlier about a multi-occupied building. It was, sort of small rooms within one building where everybody was living. It's kind of communal, and they all visit each other's rooms. Go back and forth, and they chat and have social occasions, and these things themselves can spread problems. So many variables in it. Many variables, but those pre-treatment recommendations or requirements are important to get the message across why you need them to do it. And then if they don't do it when you've arrived, you've accounted for that possibility and had a contingency plan. Absolutely vital for you. Okay, so inspection and survey. As we know, it's the most important part of the job. I would probably say, if I'm honest, 80% of bedbug related technical inquiries that come through, whether it's from pest controllers themselves or whether it's from the end user, 9 times out of 10, the problem is that the inspection and survey hasn't been thorough enough. We all know from our training, and I'm going to say here as well, that inspection and survey is not 10 minutes. It's maybe not even half an hour. Even if you get an amazing picture right in that first phone call, and the customer's very descriptive to you, it still doesn't take away the need for you to spend time and resource on the inspection and survey, because like those pre-questions, the inspection and survey is going to build that really important picture. It's going to build your approach, your action plan. It's going to tell you what you need to do. Stuff after that is easy, really, isn't it? The inspection and survey is the most important part, and sometimes the hardest part, because you've got to build that time in and commitment to finding out where the root cause has come from. Now, we don't, people ask us, where do bed bugs come from? Where has my particular infestation come from? We can rarely answer that. We can, float around some facts of where they might have been, or neighbours is a possibility, but, where is not always something we can get to the bottom of. But, certainly trying to find the areas where these bed bugs are residing, living, harbouring, where they're moving around is really, really important. And you've got to spend time I'm sure someone would probably be thinking, oh, how much time, Natalie, do you think would be needed? And it really is based on opinion. There's no fact to this, but I think from talking to colleagues and just generally experience, for a standard size double bedroom, you're looking at least 20 to 30 minutes, I believe. I'll go into a bit more in a minute with regards to what that entails, but I would say 20 or 30 minutes per room. And this is it. If in the beginning you can have this in your mind of, right, this is the amount of time I need per room, I need to inspect every room. So you've got a house that's got 5 rooms in it, so I'll let you do the maths, 2.5 hours, 2 hours, you give that quote regarding that inspection time. You need to quote for that. You need to. A customer wants a successful treatment. They don't want a cheap, bad, unsuccessful treatment. That's the fact of it. So really important to invest in that inspection and survey. It will save you a lot of problems down the road. You and your technician need to be in the mind of the bed bug. We say, when you're looking for them, you've just got to say to yourself, if I was a bed bug, where would I be? And really, I think we covered it a little bit in the first webinar a couple of weeks ago, but there really isn't anywhere that they wouldn't go. Of course, they're going to go close to the host, so it's going to be the bed is where everyone starts off, and it's the most sensible place to start off your inspection and move out. But really, once you start finding bed bugs in, you check the bed, yep, found them there. Maybe you check the side table. Oh yes, I found them there too. I'm going to check some frames on the wall. Oh, blimey, I found them there as well. And you kind of move your inspection out. We do get a feel for them. We've been dealing with bed bugs for a while. We get a feel for them. We think, oh no, it's not a particularly bad problem here. I don't need to spend too much time in this room. But I really recommend against that, because you just never know. I've found them in some really strange places that you wouldn't think, in properties that looks they were clear of bed bugs, but that one plug socket we pulled back, oh there's a nymph or an adult bed bug, which within a couple of weeks or months would grow into a bigger problem. So really important. You've got to be patient and a keen eye. Possibly if we're talking about, if you've got technicians, a lot of you might be a company owner yourself and just be yourself, or maybe have one or two technicians. But it's really important that whoever's doing these inspections wants to do it, has patience and has a keen eye, because through boredom can breed a treatment failure. If you kind of think, oh, I've checked this room enough, I've been in here 20 minutes already, I'm a bit bored now, I'm going to move on to the next one. It is reality. You can have that. So you've got to make sure that any technicians dealing with bed bug jobs, that they are motivated to do so, and they've got some experience, of course, but need to be patient and have that keen eye. So sometimes you might find technicians that you have and think, actually, I don't know if it's for them really. They seem to get a bit frustrated or bored with it. And again, that can breed problems for you later down the line. Inspection and survey then, a bit more on that. This is a lift, move, look, repeat, just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? But that's exactly what it is. We all know, we lift everything that we can, we look under it, we move things, and we just repeat it all the way around the rooms, in the bedrooms, in the lounge, dining rooms. I mean, there really isn't a place that I wouldn't look. I'd even have a little nose in the bathroom, possibly, if the problem's spread that far. Maybe the side of the bath, if it's got one of those sides that you can remove slightly, just why not? Why not? I have actually found a bed bug in a bath before. So, there's no reason not to. If you're doing that good initial consultation with your customer in the beginning, and you're given a quotation that's realistic, you would have allowed for this time. So make sure you use that time. It really will create less problems down the line. In terms of inspection tools, obviously we've got our own eyes, but that's not always the most reliable, especially when you get to those early stages of the nymphs, the first and second instar, when they're almost barely visible, and the eggs are obviously hidden away in cracks and crevices. We can't always see them. So some monitors out there, I think when I used to do bed bug control quite regularly, the monitors weren't as raved about, shall we say, or possibly as reliable in terms of how they attract bed bugs or catch them. But I have heard that there's a lot out there that are pretty good, pitfall traps, or actual pheromone attractants, or I think it's a release of body odors in some of them. I'm not going to go into trade names or particular products. You can speak to your supplier about them, but some of the monitors are quite good, I hear, and worth being used. It's this integrated inspection and survey. So use your eyes, use some monitors. I've written in there that human, they're always a good monitor. If someone's been sits on the sofa quite a bit and says they've been bitten, or they've seen them there, different rooms without the house, you can ask them. They're part of your monitor as well, as much as they hate to hear that, but it's a fact, unfortunately. And then canine. Some of you may have used canine searching for bed bugs. An interesting bit about the canine is I don't know too much about it. I've never done it myself. We do have a few members who offer the service, but canines are not actually trained to seek out the blood because it's unreliable. Of course, they're feeding from humans. We're full of blood, of course, and to train a canine on that scent could really send them off track and give them mishits, and it's really not. Also, it's not good for the dog's learning curves because they said they can give wrong signals, which then can put everything out of kilter. So I think most of these trainers they train them on casts, so skin casts, as well as the bed bug themselves, are the main things that they train them on. But it's a real, I chatted to someone not too long ago about the process of how bed bug dogs are trained, and it's as you would imagine, not it can be quite a complicated process. Of course, you hide these things and get the dog to seek it, but it's a lot more complicated than that to make sure you don't break a dog, because you can very easily on just one training exercise. If you do the wrong thing or reward the wrong thing, it can break that cycle and almost be irreversible. So yeah, all these things to consider. Absolutely. Just a few images, leaving no stone unturned. Some of the strange places we find them. I'm sure some of you, might pop up there some examples of where you found bed bugs. But certainly all these images on here, photo frames behind plug sockets, in any gap or crevice or crack that you think, a bed bug could fit there. It would if it could, or it had to. There is absolutely no place a bed bug would not go. All they're really interested in is getting access to their food source and having a safe harbourage. And the closer they can get, obviously, the better. Again, that's why our inspection always starts around the bed and sofas and mattresses, because that's where the humans are. But they will go anywhere if they need to. Okay, so yeah. No stone unturned. Right, we're ready for some questions. I haven't got any that's popped up at the moment. We've done 20 minutes. That might be because I've covered things nicely for you. Maybe it hasn't, conjured up any questions at the minute. We're just talking about that inspection and survey. But certainly, while we get on to the next bit in a moment, and when we do, if you think, well, actually, no, I did have a question about those other sections, still pop it up there. As I said, at the end, I'll be pausing again for some questions. So I will get to them, even if it's regarding something we've spoken about a fair bit earlier. The next bits we're going to go on to non-chemical control and chemical control. So yeah, I've got no questions popping up, so we'll move on to that. I think it's the first time having any questions. Good thing, bad thing, don't know. Good thing, let's go with that. So yeah, now I'm not going to be talking about trade names or manufacturers. It really is just down to the active and the way these things work that we'll have a little look at. And we're not going to go into the ins and outs of insecticide and how it works and all the different formulations that you can get, because you can speak to your suppliers about that. But certainly it's good to have a think about what is available to you and what's going to work and when it's going to work. So in terms of non-chemical, as got heating, freezing, absorbing, and immobilizing. So with heat, very specialized area. It can be anyway. We do have everything from hand steamers all the way up to full property heat treatments that will will heat the whole of the property, so all of the rooms. Really technical, really specialized, takes a lot of time, a lot of equipment, a lot of investment, and needs to be done right. I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of heat treatment, but as for those that aren't familiar with it, the most important thing, which will certainly be failure in terms of heat treatment, is if thermometers or monitors are not used in what we call cold spots. So if you're heating, let's picture a typical front room or lounge with a sofa in it, those crevices right at the back of the sofa construction, or the cushions, couldn't find the word then, they're, you know, when you're heating a room, they're going to be the areas that are going to get to that specified heat, you know, 56, 57, 58 degrees. It's going to take a long time to get there. So the outside air temperature, great, brilliant. Your monitors will be showing you that it's getting to the temperature you need. And you'll think, right, we'll leave it there and we'll do it for 4 hours. But actually, those cracks, those important cracks, and where those bed bugs are going to be living behind these sofas or these fabrics is actually not that hot, and they're not going to die. So you walk away from that heat treatment thinking, brilliant, I've got some good readings here that the air temperature's got to a certain, you know, temperature that you need to kill bed bugs and all of their life stages. But those areas within, you know, sofas or divan beds just haven't got to that temperature. And then you're going to have those callbacks, and it's a very expensive callback as well. So yeah, heat treatment, really specialised. As I said, you know, you've got things like the hand steamers, which you need the direct contact. You need direct contact for those to work. So yeah, it can work in situations where you've got, you know, quite a heavy infestation, or, you know, we can see the bed bugs on the mattress itself or in the cracks and crevices, and you can get to them directly and, you know, get rid of them. Why not? You know, get rid of all the ones you can. Use a vacuum cleaner, as long as you're careful with what you do with it afterwards and you dispose of it in a way that's not going to cause you or anyone else a problem with bed bugs. But, you know, vacuum them up, you know, get rid of the bed bugs while you can see them while they're there. So the freezing, you know, not a particular, there are a few new products out now, I believe, where freezing is, you know, again, non-toxic, brilliant thing to think about in terms of your integrated approach. But again, you need that direct contact when you're using those products. Absorption, so that's the diatomaceous earth. It absorbs that waxy layer on the its exoskeleton, its cuticles, and then causes it to die or dehydration. They loses all its moisture. So absorption, I call that. But yeah, that's what diatomaceous earth, these diatoms, do once that insect comes into contact. And then immobilize, that is say brand new. I don't know how long I mean by brand new, but it's certainly, I've never actually had the pleasure of using it, but it's another non-toxic product that we can use that immobilizes the insect. Simple as that. It encases it in a membrane of some description that stops them from being able to move at all, and therefore it will die. So again, you need direct contact for that. All these ones on the left, you need direct contact. It's not, apart from the diatomaceous earth, which you can leave in place and, you know, the bug will crawl across it. All of the others are direct contact, heat, freeze and immobilize. You need direct contact, so you've been able to see them, not residual. And then chemical control. So, you know, again, I mentioned about formulations, the dust, you know, it's got its benefits. Diatomaceous earth can be in dust, as well as, you know, some bendicarbs and other dusts are available, or active ingredients. And it's flowable and it's dry. You know, you can use these things in conduits or voids, or around where there's a possibility of contact with electrical sockets. You know, it's a lot safer than using, which you can't, you know, liquids. Which obviously you can't use in those areas. And then with the liquids, as I said, residuality, really important. I'm going to talk about a bit about resistance later on, and something to do with the residuality, but, you know, really important thing to consider. But that residuality, you know, really important that we have it, and surface appropriate. So make sure you get that formulation that's going to be appropriate for the surface that you're applying it onto. That's the description will be on the label, of course. And microencapsulated, I've just mentioned that one specifically because microencapsulated gives you a really long residuality. It's a capsule that encapsulates the chemical, usually a pyrethroid of some description. I think tetramethrin, maybe a few different ones in there, and it encapsulates that chemical, and it stays until the insect actually crawls on top of it. Then it bursts and disperses, and then gets contact with the insect and does its job. So the residuality is really long lived with microencapsulated. There's a few of them around, I do believe, still. I've got that right. So many things going on and off the market, isn't there? We've got to keep an eye on it. So it's really important, you know, you've got to read these labels, whatever you're using, religiously, because things change. Insects come off of labels. We know there's a few going on at the moment that, you know, different products coming on and off the market, and labels changing in terms of wording. Make sure you check those. and consider this formulation. But just to sort of go back, carry on with that subject, a common label direction for spraying is this one in yellow. Really important. A lot of the products specify and specifically say, right, for bed bugs, this is what you need to do. And as we know, you need to follow it. It's a legal requirement to follow the label. And not only that, but it will help you to use the product properly and get effective control. We can actually, just putting a chemical in a sprayer and happily going around, covering any surface we can see with a product is not necessarily actually going to be successful, because you might have not mixed it properly or the right formulation, or possibly in terms of the calibration of the sprayer as well is really important. But yeah, so, apply to harborages and resting places. It gives you some real good direction on what to do with it, and paying special attention to wall coverings near the sleeping area and to cracks and crevices in the bedroom fittings and furniture. And treat under loose flooring covering. So it really gives you a quick description of basically, go everywhere. But this is just a common description on labels. It's not the one. Make sure you read the particular one that you are using, and then rotate active ingredients. At the top there, I've got some listing. You've got pyrethroids and carbamates, IGRs, so insect growth regulators, and metabolic synergists. So there's a few products now. It's normally piperonal butoxide, I think it is that the metabolic synergist, and basically that synergist is something that helps to bypass resistance or the resistant genes. It helps to draw or pull forward that active ingredient to the target area needed, and to bypass any resistance that might have built up in a bedbug population. It helps a lot with it, and certainly insect growth regulators. When I'm chatting to people, for bed bugs, you really should have an insect growth regulator within your treatment strategy somewhere. Absolutely, it goes without saying. And again, these products that have got synergists in, there's a few of them out there. Just have a read of the label, you'll find them on there. Pyrethroid, we've got deltamethrin, tetramethrin, cypermethrin. We've got all sorts of different active ingredients. Really up to you to choose what's best for you. There can be resistance problems. My next page is going to address that, just to give you a bit more insight into what that looks like. But certainly rotating your active ingredients between, toxic and non-toxic, and then or chemical and non-chemical. And with the chemical side, making sure, do a bit of rotation and really have a look at the product and see what works for you. Okay, so let's go on to a bit of resistance then. So, Clive Bowes kindly let me use this image. Was chatting to him. He said, "Yeah, no problems, Natalie. It's really important, resistance, and I'll be happy to." So a big shout out to Clive Bowes. Thank you for letting me use this great pictorial display of the possible issues we've got with bed bugs and their resistance, or different layers of defense is what we call it. So we've got our chemical there. We're spraying it. The best one, think of the one that you're most favorite with. So this first one, you got BPDM. So these are different possibilities for resistance in insects. Now, the first one, I've got a red cross on it, you'll probably see, and that's because bed bugs don't overly display this at the moment. But just for interest for you, the B stands for behavioral resistance, and basically this is where the pest behavior fundamentally changes, so that it avoids pesticides. It's been seen with some mosquito examples apparently, where they just stop coming inside. They actually avoid coming into contact with it. As I said, it's behavioral resistance, but we haven't seen really that with bed bugs. It hasn't occurred. It hasn't been found. But I still wanted to address it. It's interesting. So behavioral resistance, not in bed bugs, but some insects do display it. And then we've got the P. So the P stands for penetration. Basically, some insects, including some bed bugs, evolve a modified cuticle, which basically insects, it won't then penetrate the insecticide. The insecticide won't penetrate through that surface. So it almost thickens up that cuticle, so that when you put a layer of insecticide down and that bed bug crawls across it, it's very unlikely in bed bugs that have this resistant gene that it will actually absorb into the bed bug at all. So therefore, it's not going to reach that target area of the bed bug. No kill rate at all. And this is when I mentioned back to residuality, and it's really important. Bed bugs who exhibit this penetration resistance, residuality, well, at the time doesn't matter, because it's not enough for them to actually have an effect. You've got to get direct contact with bed bugs that have this penetration resistance. You've got to get direct contact for enough to be on the outside of its exoskeleton to be absorbed. And even then, not necessarily going to be certain, but absolutely, in terms of residual insecticide, you get one of these resistant penetration bed bugs, it's not going to do anything to them. So then we've got the D for detoxification. I said that right. I thought I'd fluff that one up. This is where the insect evolves elevated levels of particular enzymes, which break down the insecticide very quickly before it can get to that kill area of the insect. You can see that target there. Some bed bugs have exhibited this. So again, whether you're using a carbamate or a pyrethroid, because of the particular enzymes that have been produced by this bed bug, it just breaks down that insecticide before it even has a chance of getting to that target zone. Almost waters it down, I guess, is a way of putting it. So this is another level, and some bed bugs do have this, some populations. And then we've got the last one, so the mutant side of action, and this is where the actual target site, for example, cholinesterase, I never say that enzyme, in this case of carbamates, has evolved slightly different structure, and it does affect the it doesn't work with that target zone. So what that chemical was produced to be able to work on, it might be certain systems within the bed bug, it's not going to actually fit together properly. So it's not going to control the bed bug, it's not going to kill it. It's just not going to work. It'll get to that target zone, but that target zone has adapted and changed that they just don't fit anymore. It's like a square into a circle. So there are a few layers of defense that bed bugs have, and I don't expect you to remember all of those. So penetration resistance, detoxification resistance, and then the mutant side of the actual action site changes its structure and stops that insecticide from penetrating. They're really important because why I wanted to go into detail with this is because this could be, and probably is, the one of the big causes of treatment failures, possible resistance. And how do you find out whether a population is resistant? And normally it's through failure. It's through months down the line of headaches and possible customer problems and complaints. Then you thought to yourself, actually, are these resistant? Are these, and not that it's too late, but you've already spent weeks or months trying to putting all your resources into dealing with this problem, or actually there's a resistance problem, and none of it was going to work anyway. So my advice with bed bugs is that right from the beginning, going right back to that first inspection and survey, is if you can collect some live bed bugs in a Petri dish or of some description, of which you've got a light layer of two different types of insects, maybe a carbamate and a pyrethroid, a light spray as you would do any surface, and then put those bed bugs within there, close it off for a couple of days and see whether you actually kill any. And then if you give it a few days and you find that actually these ones in this dish have died but those ones haven't, then you use whatever product it is you've put in this dish. So I really advise doing that, and again building that into your bed bug approach, your approach to bed bug jobs. It's it can stop a lot of problems down the line, trying to establish whether you're unfortunate enough to have some resistance. I say unfortunate enough, there's probably a lot more populations of resistant bed bugs than we know, but again, I think this is the way forward, is doing a lot more resistance checking. Okay, So just a bit more on the resistance then. Resistance isn't necessarily, it's not something they grow into because of necessarily poor treatment. It's not like the insect through poor treatment or the constant use of one insecticide creates, suddenly goes, oh, I'm going to create a resistance to that product now. That's not how it really works. How it works is that just through mutations, just through anything, any animal within, the whole of the world, can create mutations. And in insects, because of their quick breeding, their breeding cycles and how efficient they are at it, these things can come around a bit quicker than maybe larger animals. But certainly with insects, this first image there, initial susceptible population, you can see, the green ones are those that are susceptible to the chemical that you're using. If you're going to spray that chemical, if you're going to spray those, I say the picture of cockroaches there, but it's referred to them as bed bugs. You're going to spray your bed bugs with your favourite pyrethroid or carbamate. You're going to kill all the green ones brilliantly, and also in a population, after a few weeks, you'll think, blimey, I've got rid of this problem. I've killed all those green ones with my amazing product. However, a few survivors will remain because you've got two there that have the resistant gene. Now, it might be the penetration one or the detoxification one. We won't really know, but they've got a resistance of some form. And those two are surviving, as well as maybe an odd one. It happens sometimes. But the problem with that is that in the next generation, most offspring are now resistant. So you started off with a maybe 85% kill rate and 5% are resistant to your product. You kill that 95%, the 5% that's left over are resistant to your chemical, and then give it a few months or weeks or months, and then you've got a whole generation, a whole population of offspring that are resistant. So, and I think there are more sites or more cases of this being the problem than we know of. And I think this is why I go back to, if you are finding you're having problems, or initially, preferably right at the beginning, you test your populations to see whether you've got resistance, and it's going to cause you a lot less problems down the line, financially, mentally, and also for your customer, because remember, bed bugs are, I said about it in the last webinar, they're distressing. They're a distressing pest. Any pest is distressing, especially to, the customers that we deal with. But bed bugs really are, one of those pests that cause a lot of anguish. So it's really important we've got a good action plan in place. What if, always ask yourself, right, got this job, what if this happened? What if I discovered this? Consider it right at the beginning, because it can happen. Okay, so quick, just I'm not going to spend too much time. I've got a few questions popping up, which is great. But just application of equipment, I'm not going to teach grandma to suck eggs or anything, but just to touch on it, really important that you maintain your sprays and dusters, because making sure you get, proper dispersal of your insecticide or your dust, and using the right levels. It's very common with, especially diatomaceous earth, the powder and some insecticides, that we all say we read the label, but it's very common that, when I actually watch somebody putting together their sprayer, or, it's very rare do they sort of consult their label and go, right, yeah, I need to mix up this much, and this is how I mix it, and I mustn't do this and I mustn't do that. They're just, it's, chemicals, some water, and off we go. But, it really isn't always that straightforward. And so you need to make sure that you're not only maintaining your sprays and dusters, but you're using them properly. It goes without saying, but I feel I need to say it. This image was a test just to see if anyone noticed the PPEs maybe not quite correct. Did flag it up, but yeah, this is not an example of what PPE you should wear. This is this is how you shouldn't do it. So yeah, absolutely, it needs a proper RPE and some gloves on there, doesn't he? So but anyway, back to what we were saying. So follow the label. As I said, it's the law. Mix only what you need, and don't store mixed insecticides. Certainly wettable powders can be tricky, and this is all to do with your equipment and your maintenance of them. It can cause you headaches. But a lot of the time on the label, it says don't. It says mix up only what you need, don't store it overnight. Really, really important. And in terms of bed bugs, of course, a torch is valuable, really, really valuable. You couldn't do without it. We all like our torches. Okay, and PPE and RPE, make sure they're all maintained. Read the label. You know what you've got to use. Make sure anybody who's within the area that shouldn't be in the area are removed. Customers, etc. We shouldn't be carrying out these treatments with anybody there. So just one last thing, I'm going to say again, because this really will cause you or take away a lot of the problems down the line, or the potential problems down the line. A lot of the experts in the industry, and I know some of the people I speak to regularly about bed bugs, who research them or work with them a lot, say that it is a time bomb, really. And I think it's getting to that point where I'm starting to get more and more calls about bed bugs and problem issues, and a few. I'm great. I love going out on sites with members, and I'll say to all of you, if you ever want us to come out with a second pair of eyes to have a good look with you to try and help you with a tricky problem, we always will. But the calls are becoming more and more frequent. And I think possibly resistance, and yes, of course, treatment methods and application, the skill that is done through the user of these products might not be perfect, and maybe that can be treatment failures sometimes. But it can also be resistance, and it can be that you've not spent enough time doing that initial inspection and survey to actually find all the areas where these bed bugs are, and that includes neighbouring properties, making sure you go and speak to them when needed. And there are some instances when people, you get to the end of your tether. Again, another conversation I had only a couple of days ago, where a member said, these bed bugs are just every now and then it's not a massive problem, but they do seem to keep coming in, and the people within that property, the owners of the property, don't really want that pest controller speaking or going to investigate next door, because of the association of bed bugs, and they don't want to be they don't want their neighbours to know they've got a problem, just in case they haven't got a problem. But if you're kind of the end of your tether and you need to go looking in neighbouring properties, that's what you need to do. And there might be a time when you have to walk away from it, but make sure you record everything you're doing as well. Make sure you write it all down, all the recommendations you can give, manage those expectations. And just the one question I would ask you all is, if a customer pays you to get rid of bed bugs in their property, do you feel you need to fulfill that agreement? I mean, it might seem like a really silly question, but again, the complaints that we get for bed bugs, a lot of the time it is, I'm not happy, your member hasn't got rid of our bed bugs, I want my money back. And of course, there can be reasons, and the pest controllers have always done a pretty good job, but it's just this expectation, in the beginning, maybe that survey wasn't done, that inspection wasn't thorough enough, managing the expectations of the customer and saying, look, this is what I need, this is what I need to charge, this is what it's going to cost, these are the amount of visits I'm going to do, which sometimes there isn't a number to that. You've got to decide how you want to approach that side of things. But if a customer pays you to get rid of bed bugs and you say, yes, absolutely, sir or madam, I can do that, you need to fulfill that agreement. It's just professional, and you've got to put your feet in their shoes as well, especially with bed bugs, particularly distressing. Okay, so we're to the end. We have got 13 minutes left. Brilliant. We've got 5 questions that have popped up, so I'll go through a few of those now. So we've got David. Your question is, if the customer removes clutter from a room, would this heighten the risk of bed bug transfer to uninfested areas of property? So yeah, maybe should go into a bit more detail. This is a problem with only an hour to go into detail on each section, but absolutely. So, removing clutter needs to be controlled as much as the clothes that might be built up where it's in bags. So what you want to recommend, what their situation is, completely up to you. It might be a case they can just stack them in a certain area in the middle of the room so that they're not against the walls, and then also easy access for you. So you can maybe inspect some of those, that clutter, if you like. But yeah, absolutely, David, you do need to consider the risk of that. You don't want them going, okay, I'm going to move all this clutter next door to Mavis or John or something, and then she goes and infests them next door. So yes, you need to make sure any of that clutter that's removed or tidied up is done in a way that it's not going to reinfest or transfer any infestation. Perhaps, as I said, in the middle of a room can be a good idea, and not only is it away from those areas where you're generally going to treat, but also you have got that ability to inspect that clutter, whatever it may be. So great, James. What treatment would you recommend for electrical equipment, computers, etc.? Well, preferably, you've got to be careful. Firstly, of course, is that you've got the right experience or necessary training to check any electrical equipment. It's nothing that you shouldn't be checking, but certainly, anything dry, anything that's wet, of course, is not going to go with electricity. Dry powders certainly work. You've just got to think of the sort of secondary problem with using sort of powders around electrical equipment, computers, etc. is that how's it going to be removed if someone's using a keyboard and you think, oh, I've got some bed bugs in there. Treating it with a dust is not necessarily going to be the best option, because you've got contamination, and how are you going to remove that? They're not really going to be able to use the keyboard again. So where possible, obviously anything that can got lots of elements in electrical equipment that you can't heat treat, of course. You might find a freezing product maybe would work with something, or certainly dust, but you've got to think about a contamination issue if it is around anything tricky. For example, I've used it in extension cables, the plug sockets that you get on the end of the extension cables, taking it apart. I just removed them. I didn't treat them. If you can just remove the bed bugs. I didn't do that, obviously. I think we used a vacuum at the time. It's quite a while ago, trying to remember. But we just removed them. So if you can do that, that's the best way. But certainly electrical equipment, no liquids, of course, only dry. Okay, so Anonymous, why is it important to have an IGR in your treatment strategy specifically for dealing with bed bugs? So I don't know when you put this question on, it was probably before we got to the resistant part of the presentation, but that is the main reason, because of the resistance that we find or have found with bed bugs, pyrethroids or carbamates. If you've got a population that's resistant, they won't have that resistance to the IGR. So that effect on the nymphal stages, the growth issues that they'll have, which they won't be able to get to that adult form and they'll just die. We need that as just in case if you have got a resistant population to, say, a product you're using. If you've got an IGR in there, then that's at least going to do something. That will be that second help to kill those bed bugs, just in case you've got some resistance there. And again, synergists within products, they does what it says on the tin in terms of affecting or bypassing these resistant genes. I'm assuming it's pretty much all of the ones that I mentioned. But how effective are they? I'm not sure, but I've had some very good feedback from products that have these pycnyl butoxide within it, the synergist. So that's always a good idea, and obviously the IGR as well. So yeah, resistance. It's something they won't be resistant to if you do have a population. Hopefully that's answered your question. It's an interesting fact. Fabulous from Anonymous. Did you know the first case of resistance in bed bugs was recorded at a naval barracks in Pearl Harbor in 1947? I do now. I know that now. That's an interesting fact. But yeah, doesn't surprise me. And always where I think problems are always discovered like this in highly populated scenarios, because they're usually pretty tricky to get hold of. You've normally got a big population there that you can take lots of samples from, and then obviously problems are discovered such as resistance. But no, great fact. So Pearl Harbor in 1947, that's where the first case of resistance. I wonder which one it was, the penetration or the detoxification one. Great. 2 more questions. We've got some time. Yeah, good. So Colin, I like to use different chemicals in each spraying and finish with diatomaceous earth. Yeah, fabulous. There's no, I can't sit here and go, the answer to all your problems with bed bugs is this. It just, like most pest problems, there isn't one answer, is there? But yeah, your principle there, Colin, absolutely. Different chemicals on each spray is what's needed. So that integrated approach. And diatomaceous earth. I used to use diatomaceous earth as a sort of a barrier. We used to have immigration centres where population of people in and out was very high. So they might be there for a couple of weeks, they would move out and some more would come in. And it was very tricky. But all the interconnecting routes rooms, we had a sort of a layer of diatomaceous earth on the perimeter of each room underneath the carpet and pushed it back down again, and that seemed to have a positive effect. It's, you know, it's helped stop that movement. Of course, you've still got the people moving around and taking bed bugs in and out of each other's rooms, but it certainly helped with that migration themselves. Last couple of weeks ago, we talked about how bed bugs disperse and why they disperse, and as I said, that diatomaceous has helped that dispersal to lessen off, or lighten off, shall I say. So one more question from Martin. So Martin, you insist that rooms are slept in between treatments. Yeah, mentioned about them being human monitors. Unfortunate for them, but it's useful. So yeah, sleep between treatments so that bed bugs are activated to emerge from harbourage areas in. Is this critical? I mean, yeah, I think that's a question. There's no question mark on there, but I'm guessing that's a question that do you think I feel it's critical that we say this? And yeah, it's always an emotive subject, also emotive, maybe wrong word, but quite a sensitive subject to say, we need you to sleep in the room still, because that's what, encourages them to come out from their harbourage and move on to these surfaces that we've treated. And also, towards the latter end of the treatments, it gives you an indication of whether there's still a problem. That's another conversation another day, because obviously you've got the phantom bites and all sorts. But yeah, I think it is quite important and critical. You just got to handle it in a way and explain it in a way that the client understands. And in some instances, they will say, absolutely not, I'm not doing it. Do I blame them? Probably not. I've never been unfortunate enough to experience bed bugs. From what I know, I might just not have reacted to them, but touch wood. But I can imagine it's very unpleasant, and to actually lie in a bed that there are bed bugs there, to just bring them out, is not a pleasant thought. So we've got to have a sensitivity in terms of that, and there's a possibility that your customers won't want you to. So that was a bit. And then also, how long can clothes be placed in a freezer for a kill? For non-dry, yeah, absolutely. So great, Martin. I'm glad you reminded me of that. So many subjects to cover. So putting clothes within a freezer is a great way, or a great recommendation that you can give your customers. They say, so as long as you're using it in a freezer, 48 hours is, I think, the minimum. I've always said to customers, look, as long as you can, preferably, I've even got up to a week before, I want to be certain that those bed bugs, and it's more to do with those clothes, so how they're presented to that freezer environment. If they kind of just crumple them up, put them in the freezer, it's going to take a lot longer possibly to kill any insects or eggs that are tucked in a little fold that they've just crumpled up and put in. So like I said about that penetration of that cold is going to take longer than the outside of the surface of those clothes. So whereas if they're laying them quite nice and flat, or they open up their clothes and lie them all nicely in the freezer, it maybe take a bit less of time. But I would say, as I've always gone for a week and said, look, keep them in there for 1 week. But people do say generally 48 hours is long enough for that. Okay, I've got one more anonymous. Think I've got some time. Yeah, got 3 minutes. So diatomaceous earth can be mixed with water and then sprayed. Yeah, great. Not something we used to do. Actually, funnily enough, chatting to someone about that the other day. I actually feed my dog diatomaceous earth, as an interesting fact, because it's good for internal parasites. And we usually mix it in with, some water, or mix it in their food, and they eat it. It actually deals with internal parasites as well, sort of a natural way, if you like, rather than using wormers. But yeah, you can mix it with water, and it's a bit like a wettable powder. It doesn't dissolve; it stays its form, doesn't it, within the water, and you can disperse it a bit better. But yeah, great. So yeah, mix it in water. Fabulous. I've got no more questions. So I think, as I said, I've only got a minute or so left. So we'll leave it there. Just as a quick reminder on a few bits, we've got another webinar coming up in January, environmental risk assessments and non-toxic pest control. I think something for anybody that, still has concerns over, you know, what are you supposed to do? When are we supposed to do it? How often do we have to do it? Be a really good webinar for that. It was a topic that came up the other day as well as somebody wanting to see a bit more information on it. So great. So that's in January. We've got PPC Live coming up in March in Harrogate. So anybody that's up that way, come and see us, and you know, visit BPCA website to get an early registration. That'd be great. 11th of March next year. Bit of a reminder about some training that we do. So, you know, these webinars, they're good for a bit of CPD and some updates as well. But, you know, we've also got a bedbug course, full day course if you wanted to have a look into that. But again, you know, we've got airgun use here, level 2, as well as starting out and managing your own pest business. Yeah, I don't know if anybody's entered this, but best pest picture 2020. So you get £500 if we decide your picture is the best one. But certainly with bed bugs, I think you know, there's some good opportunities there for bed bug images or anything else. Absolutely doesn't have to be that. And remember, always here, Dee and myself and Kevin, if you've got any questions, email, telephone us, you know, get in contact, and we're always happy and love talking about any problems that you have with, be it bed bugs or anything else. And of course, we can always come out onto site with you. Best bit of my job. So please remember, we'll do that for you. That's the end of the webinar. Thank you, everybody. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you next time.